Hello everyone, today is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. My name is Evan. Welcome back to another midweek market recap video. We're going to jump right into our market technicals dashboard. We can see stocks closed green on the session here. All of the major indices closed higher on the session. Nasdaq 100 out in front leading, closing at all-time highs. If we look at the 5-day change numbers, you can see Nasdaq clear winner here, back to its leadership role for the past couple of weeks now. It's rotated back into technology, largely semiconductors, and biotech, which makes up, predominantly the QQQs. And you can see 2.66% over the 5 days. IWM's red, Dow is red, S&P 500 just clinging on to positive territory. Now, if we look at some of the simple moving averages here versus those major indices, we're a little bit mixed in the short-term. Dow Jones below the 10 SMA. We're above the 50 in all of the indices, and in the Russell and in the Dow Jones below the 200 period simple moving average. If we scroll down and look at sectors here, you can see biotech, technology, and communication services at the top of the relative strength list over the past 5 sessions. And on the downside, we've got real estate, we've got energy and utilities, all pretty firmly negative here. We've got a pretty split picture, basically got 5 indices in the green over the past 5 days, and then we have 7 in the red. So a pretty split picture. It's going to really depend on what sectors you own and what types of stocks you're owning, if you're enjoying your portfolio over the past week or disappointed with it. In terms of major markets, oil, emerging markets, and silver at the top of the list. Gold is number 4, so pretty commodity heavy there. And on the downside, we've got volatility, which is unwinding, natural gas, and LQD, which is our credit ETF. So let us jump into the charts now with TC2000. We're looking at our equity grid. We've got our smart trend filters applied here. And if we start off with the top left, which is the S&P 500, this is a weekly time frame for the S&P 500, and notice here we can see that we are still in bullish trend on this time period. We've been bullish trend now for the past 5 weeks, or I guess going on to the 5th week here, and we are kind of just hanging out underneath currently the pivot from the 5th, but still holding well above our trend filter. Notice we do have a pretty flat trend line here, right? So if we look at those dots, they are fairly sideways with just a slight gradual uptick to them. So again, it doesn't suggest that we're in the weakest, that we're in the strongest trend to the upside. It actually, in fact, suggests it's a little bit weak here, but it is still bullish, and you can't argue with that. If we look in the top right here, this is certainly a picture with much more strength to it. This is the Nasdaq 100. You can see price itself is at all-time highs. Trend has a much more vertical, steeper slope behind it, and this has been bullish now for quite a number of weeks, going back to right at the first week of May. If we look at the bottom left here, Russell 2000 IWM. Again, you can see for going on the 5th week here, still bullish, very gradual in its slope, but still, again, bullish. Prices above it, below the pivot from 2 weeks ago. In the bottom right is international, so AQX, international stocks minus the United States. You can see this is also bullish trend. It's fairly weak in its slope, but still bullish here for going on the 4th week in a row. So no changes here whatsoever as we progress through a new week. The daily chart is where we have a little more turbulence kind of setting in. If we look at the S&P 500, notice here we're back in this little chop zone, and we've got this yellow transitionary sort of warning getting thrown right now. We had that last week as well. We had 2 days of kind of that bullish transition up. Now we're back to the neutral zone here. So in the S&P 500 on the daily chart, there is some indecision. There's some cross currents. We should be paying attention to that. Generally speaking, when using the smart trend filter here, we sort of basically give credit to the prior trend that was in motion. In this case, it is to the upside. So again, buyers technically, I would say here still have the benefit of the doubt, but we do want to be a little bit cautious there in the short term. Top right, Nasdaq, all strength here, still going green. Bottom left, Russell 2000. You can see again 4 days now of chop, and then basically, you can almost argue that it's been 8 days of sideways neutral chop. We only had this one little day in here where we tried to get going to the upside, but quickly kind of went back to neutral. So that is a little bit of a cause for concern here in the Russell and the S&P 500. ACWX is surprisingly actually doing pretty well here, at least in the short term on the daily chart. So if we look at some of the individual sort of price action analysis, the way we sort of framed out this market last week was looking at this picture, and for the S&P 500 on our Friday recap, we effectively talked about this band of resistance here from 3130 to 3140, call it. You can see the cluster of highs here over the past 6 trading sessions now, and notice that we still haven't been able to break above it. We made another attempt at it today with this gap higher, but notice with the failure into the close here, we kind of pulled off of the highs of the session, left a little tail up there, and again, this resistance is still kind of coming to keep this market suppressed below this 3140 area. So I think in the immediate term, we have the coil, we have the consolidation here. We've gone nowhere now for 7 trading days or 6 trading days, and we really are going to look to see how this ends up expanding in this zone. This is the immediate range we should be watching here, where all this trading has overlapped, and now heading into the remainder of the week, or the second half of this week, that's what we want to be paying attention to. Remember, just above this is this open gap here, which is still pretty open. We got into the gap just a little bit on a few of these attempts to push higher, but this island reversal that was created here 2 weeks ago, or almost 3 weeks ago at this point, still kind of holding on to the market, and I think that speaks to some of this resistance that you're seeing in here. If any of this trapped supply wants to be made whole, or suddenly just sort of take the position off for a small loss, you're seeing supply hit the market, and you're seeing the market struggle in this general area. So from a technical perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Of course, we'll have to see how this fits into the end of the week, and what kind of catalysts are in store now for the market. But this is basically, still pretty much the roadmap we should be paying attention to. 3140, right where we basically closed. 29, basically 3,000 on the downside. Another way we sort of framed it out in last week's picture was to essentially just use this week's highs here on the 12th as our top end of the range. So you can kind of come in right around 30, what is that? 3230, and on the low end of the range, basically last week's lows. And this is kind of, again, just the broader range that you can start to look at here that this market has been trading in, and can look for some more direction for it to break out of. If we go to the Russell 2000 next, you can see the Russell 2000 here, a little bit weaker, starting to show its weakness over the past week or so in terms of relative strength. The resistance here right around this 144 level is again a spot that we talked about in our Friday stock market weekly recap, and you can see the market is still just struggling there. It it tested it today. It closed near the lows of the session, still closed positive on the day, but at the lows of the session. So resistance here still kind of holding its grips. We're 6 days very tight in here for the Russell 2000. So once again, we should expect some expansion here, I would say, in the broader indices sooner rather than later. And that could come to the upside, right? You can get expansion and volatility to the upside. That's usually, what most would consider a breakout momentum. And or it could come to the downside, and we could in fact sort of roll over here. And again, with the S&P and the IWM, back to the trend filters here, this is is why we're seeing the conflict or this neutral state right now. It's saying that there's mixed information here. It's a tough call. It's a tug of war right now, and these are always the tricky markets to trade in the short term, unless you're scalping or scalping these smaller ranges on an intraday basis or on a day-to-day basis. So that's the Russell 2000 there. Ranges, I think, are very clear. Again, this market's behaving very well technically. 133.50 to the downside. 144 is the immediate kind of resistance area to pay attention to, and then up around 152 was the highs from a few weeks ago. Nasdaq 100 is the only thing that has some clear direction here. Of course, the action today isn't the prettiest of candles. We again closed off of the highs, closer to the lows of the session, giving us this topping tail here. So that is, gives us a little concern in the very short term. But obviously, if we just zoom out and look at it in any type of longer term time frame here, we're still in a very clear uptrend. We're trading at all-time highs. This is the market leader. It contains the leading stocks in the market. So again, Q's just continuing to sort of strong arm this market and kind of dragging everything else with it to the upside. So Nasdaq trading at all-time highs. Let's see if the sellers get some follow through to this intraday reversal. Otherwise, trend is still very much intact right now. If we look at a couple of our other markets here, a couple of other screens, LQD, investment grade, junk, high yield, both same kind of positioning here as they've been in. Bullish for the investment grade credit, transition or neutral for junk. Bottom left, we've got volatility, which VIX itself is starting to unwind a little bit. We'll take a look at the price action of that in just a moment. You can see the actual trend filter, though, is still hanging on to that yellow state. And then TLT here also in the yellow on the weekly time frame. Here's what things are looking like on the daily with our smart trend filters for each of these markets. Notice the bottom right is probably most interesting with TLT trying to move bullish today after a long stretch of sideways to down. Last but not least, or the last screen we'll look at here before we dive into some individual stocks, GLD. Top left, nice and bullish, breakout happening. Silver, bullish, breakout or new highs happening. USO is actually holding on. It's not rolling over yet, but the trend is still very much bearish on the weekly chart. Again, there's just so much damage to repair here, but it is credit where credit is due. Oil is rebounding and it is holding the prices from the past month or so. DBC commodities into that neutral state. Now, a couple of the individual tickers I just want to mention. GLD. So GLD here. This was a highlight in our stock market weekly recap on Friday. Also posted individual charts on this on social media. GLD here, 50-day sideways consolidation. Talked about the fact on Friday that this was starting to look pretty poised for a breakout here, closing pretty strong, 1% up, uptick in volume. We got follow through yesterday, more follow through today. Looks like gold here is in the midst of another breakout to not quite all-time highs, but multi-year highs, and continuing this long-term trend after a very nice and healthy consolidation. So that should not be a surprise to anybody that watched our past couple of videos. Same thing with biotech. I think this is the strongest performing. It is the strongest performing sector over the past several days or week. This was a highlight as well, and a direct call out from our Friday video. We talked about the very kind of similar look here as it had to gold, where it went sideways here for a little over a month, a little bit shorter than what GLD did, but we got that nice close on Friday at new highs. Notice we also, just basically had a clean close over all this prior supply and the highs. And then we got the follow through on Monday. We got the follow through today. Of course, Tuesday here you can see a little bit of an ugly intraday reversal, but still price structure wise, this thing's looking good, and it shouldn't be that much of a surprise. If you've been following along with just some of the basic TA that we've been doing. Now, last but not least is the VIX. I want to just talk quickly about this because the VIX is continues to be off in sell-off mode. It's basically retraced 80% of this day here. Remember on the 11th, on Thursday, we had the huge turnaround in the market, 48% pop in the VIX. We've effectively now given back the majority of this big pop here. Notice though that this did briefly trade below 30 today, but we did, end up rebounding into the close. It closed around 31. So again, still a VIX that is extremely elevated from historical norms, and it's something that you just need to always keep in the back of your mind that with a VIX at 30, it's just still kind of got to hold a grip on this market that things can turn pretty quickly. There's still plenty of fear and protection being bought with kind of everything that's going on in sort of the macro picture. So that's it. That is the midweek tour around the markets. I got a second half of the week to play, so we'll see how some of these weekly candles finish up. But a couple of interesting moves here to pay attention to, and some of those strong areas of the market continue to get stronger. So that's it. Thanks so much, as always, for tuning in and watching. Every Tuesday, we do the midweek videos. Wednesdays, we do some trade ideas. Fridays, we do our long-form stock market weekly recap. You can subscribe on our YouTube to stay up to date, or follow us at thetraderisk.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video update.